What an illustrious panel. Let's give our panel a hand this morning. Starting from the far side, we've got Kim Conroy, we've got Melanie Beeler, we've got Olivia Branham, we've got Nick Duke, and we got Johnny Robertson. So each of these 5 represent some segment of a single population in our church. And I just wanted to be able to ask them a few questions for you to be able to hear their responses. And this morning, as we're talking about this, even though we're not taking questions from the congregation this morning, if you would like to follow up on a question, on an answer that they've given, or if you would like to maybe talk with them or just learn a little bit more about where they are, and maybe you have some questions for them, they will be available after service for you to be able to come up and find and carry on the conversation. This morning, I really kind of want to start with you guys, Johnny and Kim, as both of you have recently, over the past few years, have lost your spouse. And I wanted to start with you, Kim, and ask you, how did you navigate through the loss of a spouse without losing your faith?
Thanks. I don't have my glasses, so I can't see squat. So y'all are a great big blur. That's a blessing at this point.
What?
You know, my husband had a massive stroke about 4.5 years ago. And through that time, what God taught me was absolutely irreplaceable. I cannot imagine him teaching me and taking me to the level of faith that he's given without that happening. So even in the very worst of circumstances, the worst thing I could ever imagine happening, and it was the worst thing that had ever happened, God was so present. He was so available. He was so real that I can look back at that situation now and say, not only did I maintain my faith, first of all, it wasn't mine, it was something that God gave me. He gave me a gift of faith. So it was something that he provided at that time that I so desperately needed, that I can look back at that and say, in a very strange way, the hardest thing in my life is one of the biggest blessings of my life, because I learned that this life is not about us, even though we're not insignificant. This life is about, all right, God, this life is about your glory. So if we run everything that happens to us through that filter and look at it with eyes of asking, Lord, how can I bring you glory in this situation? How can you be so real to me that I want to bring you glory? Then it becomes a very different perspective. And that's what he taught me through Jim's passing.
Thank you so much, Kim. Johnny, I want to ask you the same question. I know Patsy's been gone for a little longer than Jim has been gone, but how did you navigate through the loss of a spouse without losing your faith or way?
Well, first of all,
I think it is. It's not, Johnny. That was just your voice. I meant that in a good way.
First of all, losing my faith though across my mind. I never questioned why Patsy passed away. I believe it was God's plan. And I learned that from a very good friend of mine who lost his spouse several years ago. One of the sweetest people that you would ever know. And I asked him, why did God take her and leave other people who are still here? And she was so good. He came back and said, you know, none of us are good. We all fall short of the glory of God. And God loves every one of us the same. So it's not what we do for someone to be, it's how much God loves us. So I don't question why he took it. He and I had a lot of conversations. And we talked a lot. And my question was always, why did you do it? What is it you want me to do? Why did you leave me to do the work that I do in the situation that I'm in? And give me the strength and the courage. And then the other thing I did to get through it, I did a lot of reading about grieving, mourning, and being able to love it. So when you lose a loved one like your spouse, me and my friends, I get to test it. I mean, you hurt it. You don't feel like loving. But you can love it. And I'll talk about that.
And Johnny, you work now at a funeral home here in town, and you help. God has used you to help relate to people who are grieving. Isn't that right?
Yes, I do. I work for Parker Mortuary Park.
They've underwritten this segment of.
But anyhow, not only that, but I think God sent me there a year before she passed away to prepare me for how to deal with grief, because I've lost people to deal with. And so it was very, very important lesson for me to learn when sometimes that I had to deal with it. So now I share my story with any spouse that I get the opportunity of what they're going to be going through. Because if you don't lose a spouse, you don't know. Trust me, you think you know, but you don't know until you actually know what's going on.
You'll hear something really neat. Johnny came to pick Jim's body up after he passed. And I did not know that until much later. And Johnny had told me. And I thought, even the times when I was not aware, God was still attending to every detail that meant something significant to me. It was a great blessing.
Wow.
So I got a true story I want to tell. Jamie told me about a year and a half ago how long we've been here to be a breeder. And I told him I'd think about it for about 15 seconds. I said, you test back, yes. Okay, so you can tell if you come in that door over here that I love doing that. And if you've ever been to Parker Mortuary, you don't go in there mortuary without somebody in the door. And when I'm working, it's usually me. So I had a lady come up to me one day not long ago and she said, "You go to First Baptist Church?" And I was with her, and we got so many people out there. Faces and names, she looked up. And then she looked at me and she said, "Oh yeah, you're that doorman." I thought, 72 years old, that's what I'll become. But just think about it. What God has used me to do to greet people. The first thing when you come to First Baptist Church, I hope you give you a warm welcome. When you walk in Park and Work, I hope you give you a warm welcome. When you leave, I hope you do a send-off. So I think God gave you that one of the things when I prayed for why are you leaving me?
You went from Papa John to a doorman.
Yeah, I won't say just a couple of things.
Has nobody been listening? All right, I'm going to say it all over
Will
again.
you repeat it all over again, Johnny?
But to get through this whole ordeal, and Kim can attest to this also, I believe, you do a lot of crying. That's a necessity. And guys, when you see a spouse cry because they lost, they're not losing it. They're mourning. They're grieving. Let them cry. Encourage them. Okay? And of course, you got your family to help you get through it. All my siblings came in from the East Coast to be here during that time. But I have a son, 4 grandchildren, and a daughter-in-law. They support me. And keep in mind, they lost a mother and a grandmother. I lost a spouse, but they lost their mother. My son lost his mother, and my grandchildren lost their grandmother. Mm-hmm. But God also used one of my grandchildren, Taylor, to get me through these last 5 or 6 years. When he was all going through high school, he spent 2 nights a week to me, kept me company. I always look forward to that. Now, as he's beginning his new career and he's gone to school and he's now working, he's living with me. I mean, God has just provided, just like Kim said, everything for us that we can't imagine. And then, of course, I got friends. And I'm not going to mention any names because I'll leave somebody out. But I've got so many good friends, and I've got some that just stand beside me no matter what going on in my life. They make sure I'm not alone during a holiday or a meal or whatever. But one thing that I couldn't go by without saying today, you got to remember the deviled eggs and the green beans. And those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, for some reason or another, I learned how to make deviled eggs after my wife passed away. And it seemed to be the hit of the church. And
They're good.
I make a lot of them for individuals. And then the brown sugar green beans for a special one.
They're good as well.
And I love doing that, and it makes me feel good. So. And I live life moment by moment, not day by day, not week by week, moment by moment. And right now, that's all I got to say about that.
So to sum it up, it sounds like, Kim, one of the things that really helped you be able to navigate that difficult season was really the nearness of God and His presence in your life and being able to see Him as very real in some very specific and tangible ways. And it sounds like for Johnny, a lot of what was really seeing how God still had a purpose for you and leaving you and opening those doors and leading you to those opportunities. And, of course, having family and friends around really helped you navigate through that very difficult season.
Exactly. One of the things I think God made a shift in my life is that, I'd heard about people saying His presence is enough, His presence is enough, and I'm a real action doer kind of person, so it's kind of like, yeah, that's all good. What's He going to do? What's He going to bring about? And God taught me through 3 months of being able to stay with Jim morning, noon, and night in 5 different hospitals as we went through this journey of him recovering, then things changing, and him going into the dying process. And I could see God preparing Jim to come home. I could also see Him preparing me to release him to come home and even find reasons to celebrate in that. So first of all, He brought me an awareness of how real His presence actually is. That if we spend all of our time seeking what is He going to do, we miss who He is. And learning to just really enjoy and dig deep and find and let Him show me who He is took care of all of the questions I had about what He was going to do. Was He going to restore my husband? Was He going to take my husband? That whatever He decided would be right. And I found that peace when I just focused on who He is and asked Him to make Himself very real to me. And the other thing was that God showed me that eternity, yes, is something we very much look forward to, but eternity is here with us now. And we don't live this life just to graduate to eternity. God is very busy building our eternities now, and so learning to see life from an eternal perspective, starting every day, never ending, gave me a different focus than I just have to get through this life and then I can really live, which I think is very typical of when you're going through mourning. Some things you just get through. There were many, many days I just got through the day. There were years. I look back and I think I just got through the year. But I can look back now and see at almost 5 years, the layers that God has built about just the truth of who He is and what He has in store. And for those of you that knew Jim, you know he was an amazing man, but he is even more amazing now than ever. And so I am looking forward to seeing how God has completed him because I have a lot of questions, and I'm very satisfied to wait for those answers.
Thank you so much, Kim and Johnny. Melanie, I want to turn the focus to you right now. As a divorced woman, it's been said that divorced people sometimes feel invisible in the church. Can you explain what that might mean, and what are some practical ways that our church or a church can correct that?
Okay, you bet. For those of you who don't know, I've been divorced for almost 2 years. Just to give you a little background of me, I was a minister's wife at one point in time. So I was married for 22 years. I was young when I got married. I was 21. So if you do the math, you can figure out my age there. So, because ladies don't tell, right? But
That's very bold of you.
What's
very
that?
bold of you.
Yes, right. Divorce is, you guys are talking about the grieving process with the death, and someone in this church told me when I first separated with my husband that divorce is like a death. And you grieve that. You are grieving the loss of what could be and what would be. So you have your whole life planned ahead of you. You think you do. And then all of a sudden that comes to a screeching halt, and you have to come up with another plan. And so in coming up with all of that, you suddenly find yourself dealing with extreme self-esteem issues. You don't know who you are anymore, which we can talk about in a minute. But I think there's a couple of reasons why divorced people feel invisible in the church. Divorce is a very taboo subject still, even in modern days, even in 2019, because the Bible says we're not supposed to divorce, yet here it is. Here we are. We know that 50% of Americans are divorced. That's nationwide. We know that. That is a statistic. It may be even higher in some areas of the country for different varying reasons. Yet I don't know that many divorced people in our churches. And why is that? Where are they going to church? Are they going to church? Is it just our church that's missing out on them? I don't think that that's the case. So don't feel like, oh, I'm an utter failure. We're utter failures here at First Baptist. We're not. I think it's a failing of the Christian body in general, denominations wide. It's not just us. It's not just Baptists, because it is this taboo subject and it's awkward. It is just awkward. I don't know what to say to her now. And that's okay. You know, it's learning to bridge that awkwardness. And I know that you guys have been nothing but supportive of me since my divorce. You've been wonderful to me. And I know that at any point in time, I can reach out and someone will be praying for me. Sometimes they're praying for me when I don't even know that they are. And that has shown up. But there is still this idea that we're invisible. Part of it is our own perception. Because of our self-esteem issues, because of guilt that we may carry, other things that are related to the divorce itself, leaves us in a very vulnerable situation personally. And we don't know how to handle that, and what do? We withdraw. And that's very normal. I think you guys have probably dealt with that as well, from losing a spouse through death. Losing one through divorce is very similar. You don't know who you are. You don't know what's happening. I didn't know up from down for a while. And I had friends who simply had to say, I think you need to do this today. You know, my parents, I don't know where I'd be without my parents. There were days that they'd have to give me tasks. Just, can you manage this week? I'm like, I think I can do that one thing this week. Okay. Because you don't know. You don't know where you are. And so you naturally withdraw in yourself. You don't seek out. You don't reach out sometimes. I'm a verbal person, and many of you, some of you are going to laugh right now when you hear that, because you know I'll talk your leg off. But still, there are times when you keep it all in. And it doesn't really matter how the divorce happened. There's going to be different things. And I might touch on that again in a minute. But part of it is our own perception and learning to reach out. Part of it is the church, in that we are not seeing the divorced people. We are not seeing the single people in the church. There are sometimes they may wander in. You know, when you don't want to be seen, what do? You come in late, you leave early, you sit by the door. It's our job as a church to try to seek them out. Not just see them, but look for them. We've got to find them because they are getting lost. I also think about, how many times do we have date night for our families? And that's wonderful. We need that. Our families need that. Our married couples need that. Marriage retreats, that's very common nowadays in the church. All churches across the city, across the nation are having marriage retreats. When was the last single dad night?
That's good.
When did we have a single dad night? And poor single dads. Single moms, we reach out to each other because we're talkers, right? We are verbal. We reach out to one another, but single dads get kind of lost in this because they may not know how to cook, but they're stuck on Tuesday nights cooking for their kids. And sometimes we are missing opportunities, and maybe we don't know what to do, but it's time maybe to see outside the box, see them, think outside the box, and seek God on what we can do about it.
Wow. That's gold. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Olivia and Nick, that season in singleness before you're married, I know both of you are open to a spouse, and it's just, I don't know. I'm just going to move on. I feel like I needed to clarify that, but I don't. Anyway, let me just ask you this, because I think this is an element, and I saw it too when I was single. I experienced it, that sometimes there's a temptation, a unique temptation for single people to substitute an earthly relationship for their relationship with Christ. Does that make sense? That sometimes, the enemy is always offering us a substitute, and sometimes I think that we can be, as single, we can become so impatient or so wrapped up in getting an earthly relationship that we want that without intentionally wanting it to, but to substitute that for our relationship with Christ. Have you ever experienced that? How do you battle against that? Have you noticed that ever in your life? And I'll start with you, Olivia.
I would say absolutely. There's a temptation to substitute something for a relationship with Christ, but I would say for me it's not so much an earthly relationship, but different experiences. And I don't think that's a uniquely single problem. You know, the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But Christ came that we may have abundant life. So anything we perceive as giving us abundance, you know, whether that's a relationship or, you know, trying a new thing or going somewhere new, it's easy to substitute that for a relationship with Christ if we don't know the abundance that He will give us.
So you managed to really battle that temptation to find abundance in something else. How?
For me, the biggest thing is pursuing people that I know love the Lord, revere the Lord, and having them speak truth to me and over me, and be like, hey, you know, you're avoiding this, or that was really selfish of you, or just having someone call me out and say, this is what's true and this is what's not. That's the biggest thing for me.
What about you, Nick?
I feel like when you aren't focusing fully on Christ and what His call and His steps for you are, you start to fall into being lonely and not. I don't want to say not just focusing on others, but just falling in and being like looking around you and comparing you to what everything around you is. And I know a lot of times, a lot of my friends that I have now are either in relationships or not, and that's cool, and they do a good job of still hanging out and stuff. But I feel like when I'm not in the Word every day, or if I'm like out and like doing stuff and I'm not focused on Christ, that those are the times where the enemy kind of just starts to just come in and say, hey, you should be here. You're not going anywhere with your life because you're so far behind, and you're 23, you should be doing something, and at that point I'm not. So I don't try to fill in with earthly relationships, but I know when I'm not focused on the Bible or focused on the Word and what God's saying and following His footsteps, that it's easy to fall into the trap of this is what I need to do, and then like just start to hang out kind of with the wrong, like not the wrong crowd, but hang out with the friends who are going to make you feel wanted. And
I think that's a really important part, Nick. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think even though each person on this panel has found themselves in this stage of life differently, either through death, divorce, or decision, each one of your places you're in right now represent a very unique space, a very unique time. And I know for my mom, I watched my mom get divorced twice. She was divorced 3 times, twice in my life that I got to see. And that stage, that period between her ex and her next, was really the most crucial stage in my mom's life. There were people that were always trying to lead her, guide her. She really had to be discerning on who she listened to. And sometimes because of a temptation to want to be in an earthly relationship, she compromised on some things, and she made some decisions that, looking back, she wished she could have taken back that affected her and her family greatly. So this is a very unique season. Whatever God has in store right now, to be able to surround yourself with those voices that are going to speak truth into your life. I want to jump back up. Let me ask you guys, Olivia and Nick, really quick. What are some things that you have learned or relearned about God during this single season in your life?
Well, having never been married, I will say literally everything I know. But I think for me, the biggest thing is that God is so beautiful and so holy and righteous, worthy of all honor and glory and praise, and that doesn't change based on my marital status.
That's good.
If I get married, it's not like this secret club that I get into, like, ooh, I get a new part of God. Like,
that's right.
You know, it's like I may see a new side of God's character, but He didn't change. It's just my situation. So, yeah.
Amen. Nick?
I mean, I think God is or it makes me feel like that God's just like all loving, that He really does love us, and you don't need anyone else to feel that love that He's going to give you, because no one else can give you that feeling of the love He's going to give you. You don't need to be in a relationship or married to be able to go and serve Him, and it's not like a requirement that says in the Bible like you got to be married to do this stuff. So go out and I try to focus on going out and serving for Him, and having Him just knowing that He's gonna love me, and, you know, one day if that's in His plans, it'll happen, and just being able to sit and be content with what He's saying.
Amen. Amen. Kim, what did you learn or relearn about God during this season in your life after the passing of Jim?
Probably the biggest thing that I learned was God's faithfulness, that He was truly present. He never would leave me. He always provided exactly what I needed. He still does to this day. I don't have to wonder if He's going to meet a financial need, if He's going to meet a housing need, if He's going to meet an endurance need. He has promised to do that, and He can do no less than be faithful, because that's who He is. So God can't be contrary to His own nature. So I think one of the things that I would just want to encourage everyone here who is married is knowing that when you go through this time, you know, and unless the Lord sees to take you both out together, you will go through this time. It's not something to be feared, because God promises to be enough. Jim used to say, God doesn't give you dying grace until you're dying, which means you can't look ahead and borrow trouble, but also says that you have to rest in the fact that He will give us what we need exactly when we need it. And that does provide us with a strong point of peace just to grab hold of and to get through some very, very challenging times through. And one day, 100 years from now, we'll all be in heaven, and we'll look back, and we will be amazed at seeing God's faithfulness and how He has threaded that through our lives, because that's who He is.
Amen. Johnny, what spiritual advice would you give to someone else going through a similar situation? You got to talk in the mic, brother. We got you one.
Oh, you do? Oh. In my situation, I mean, I'm going to just be very simple. First thing I tell them to do is cry. Cry. And then cry some more. And I usually tell the spouse that that's what they need to do, and don't let anybody talk them out of it. If I get the opportunity, I will tell a child, one of the children, if you see mom crying, don't stop her. Encourage it, because that means she's going through the healing process. If she doesn't do that, her grieving process is going to be a whole lot longer. But along with that crying, we must laugh. You know, the Bible tells us there's a season to cry and a season to laugh and have joy. So we must enjoy life too. And I think that's very, very important. You have to stay with God. Okay, and I had a whole thing, we're going to run out of time. But Mike Mann used to tell me all the time, it's all about the love. And I believe that with all my heart and soul. And I could give you a big lecture real quick on love, but I'm not. But you're only going to get authentic love through God. And that's even for your spouse. Okay? So you've got to stay. So when you're in our situation, you got to stay with God so that you can learn to love again. Not necessarily to get another spouse, but just to love people and love and receive people. That's what we live for. That's why God created us. And you've got to have that. The other thing is, it's okay to be who you are. To be a widower, to be single, to be a divorcee. God made you. And what is the old saying? He didn't make any junk. So be okay with who you are. And live within that. And do understand that you do have the capability of loving again. Only with God's help.
Philippians 4:11 says, not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I've learned in whatever situation I am to be content. Someone once said, if you can't find contentment with Christ as a single Christian, you're going to struggle to find contentment as a married Christian. And I just found that to be a fascinating truth. Appreciate being able to hear all of that. Melanie, I want to ask you, what advice would you give to someone who's struggling or in a similar situation that you are?
I have a friend right now who's just gone through a divorce, and she is a Christian, but she is unable to pray or even spend time in the Word. She just can't do it right now. And so, I intercede on her behalf a lot and just pray for her. But I would say stay in the Word, even if it's just a verse a day. Yeah. The Bible app is fantastic for that. It'll give you a verse of the day. And if that's all you can handle, then just do that. And sometimes it may just be reading that because you're dealing with so much that it may just be reading it and it's not sinking in, or you think it's not sinking in. But there's going to be a point in time when it does. So I would say stay near to God because He is there and He has a plan for you. I think a lot of people feel forgotten by God in that moment, in those times, that transition, that period of time that is, I don't even know what to call it, but very low. It's a very low time for most people that are going through divorce. But I would say He has a plan for you. And of course, Jeremiah 29:11 tells us that it's not to harm you, but it's to prosper you and to give you a hope and a future. And that is so true. Even though we think our future is, everything we planned is done, it's over. And for what maybe you planned it is, but there's a new plan. And God already knew what that was. He already has been shaping that and forming that. Sometimes you have to go through the fire to come out refined, right? And so that is what is happening sometimes when there was a lot of turmoil during my divorce, and sometimes we still go through that. Just because my ex-husband and I don't get along, I'll be honest. We don't get along really well, and so there's turmoil between us, and I think that's fairly common as well. It's hard to work with someone that you were so close to because there's this fine line between loving someone and then all of a sudden you can't anymore. You have to distance yourself in that way. And you're coming up with this new plan, but He already knows. He knows that you were going to do this. He's trying to set you on the right path if you'll listen to Him. And sometimes you have to go through really terrible times, and it will come out better in the end because He has a plan. And you don't always know that, but maybe in a few years or a few months or even weeks, you will see that. You will see, oh, I see why I had to go through this now so that I could withstand this here. And sometimes you may never know, but know that God knows, and He's got this plan for your life. So I would say definitely stay in the Word, even if it's just small bits, because you're grieving, and I understand that. Also, reach out to your friends. They want to help. They really do. Your Christian friends are there for you. They want to be there for you. I would be nowhere without my Christian family and friends. I'd be nowhere. I would probably not even be coming. And so to church, I would probably have fallen away. I don't know where I'd be. And so I'm grateful for them because they were always quick to pray for me, but sometimes they didn't know what to pray for. So it's important to reach out to them and keep them close to you as well.
Thank you, guys. I want you to give these panelists another hand, if you would. Some of you guys might say, why do we do this? We do this because we believe in the family. And these people have a story to tell. And if you were to do a word cloud over all of the discussions here, you probably would have heard several words recurring. It was plan, purpose, and Jesus. And you heard many of them say up here, I know God has a plan for my life. And one of the important things that we have to remember as believers is that the enemy has a plan for our life as well. And these five represent unique stages in our life. And I hope today, as you've gotten to hear their stories and see their faces, that it would really be burned and impressed on your memory to remember to pray for them through these unique stages that they're in life. But not only to pray for them, to pray for the others that they represent setting up here today. Our goal as a church is to make disciples and to help bring people to maturity in Jesus Christ. And so that you would pray to that end, not just again for them, but for those they represent. I want to tell you today, I don't know the makeup, I don't know the marital status, I don't know where you're at. I'm not in your kitchen, okay? But what I want to say this morning is I want to extend an invitation to you. This is the wrap-up. This is the response time of our morning. And I just want to say I know that God has used the testimony of these five in some very specific ways to really grab a hold of you right where you are right now. For some of you, this was a breath of fresh air. For some of you, a light went on. For some of you, something changed in here. And I've got counselors. In fact, I'm going to ask my counselors, if you want to come up, some of you hop to the side, some of you come around the front. I'm going to ask you to stand up here. And I'm also going to ask you five if you'd be willing to come down here on the front row as well. I know that there may be some people that really want to speak with you. So you guys can go ahead and come on down now at this time. And if you want to talk to them, if you want them to pray with you, this morning, if you don't know Jesus Christ, we want to invite you to come today. He is the one who gives purpose and meaning to our lives. No matter what state, no matter what situation we're in, Jesus Christ is literally the way, the truth, and the life. And if you don't know him today, I'm going to ask you to come and receive him as talk to one of these counselors and say, today's the day I want to begin my relationship with Christ. Sin separated us. Jesus paid for our sin debt so we could know him forever, so we could be restored.
I hope you've been blessed by this message. If the Lord used this sermon to lead you to a decision or a greater level of commitment, please let us know. We'd love to pray for you and provide any resources we can to help you on your journey with Jesus. For further information about First Baptist Joplin, look for us on your favorite social media platform, our website, firstjoplin.org, or if possible, stop in and worship with us at 10 a.m. on Sundays.